This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring, ring, ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Just walking around Madrid right now. Been here for about a week, and it's been uncharacteristically cold and wet. And the sun's just come out and it's quite nice. So I'm on the way home from the cinema, but I think I'm going to elongate my walk a little bit, just sort of take a neighborhood stroll. Went to see Mickey 17, the new Bong Joon-ho movie in the cinema today. And then I rarely get to go to the cinema, but I'm here with visiting the in-laws because there's so many hands available. Grandparents, aunts, uncles. I'm kind of freed up somewhat from my parental duties. And I usually like to take advantage of that to check out some movies. Now, most films only play in the evening and I can't go see them because I've got to do bedtime, got to do my daughter's bedtime. Now we got 2 kids, so we kind of need one parent each at bedtime. And then a lot of the films that are playing here in Madrid that I really, really would like to go see, I can't go see because my Spanish isn't good enough to read Spanish subtitles, so I can only go see them if they're entirely in English. There's a lot of films that, if it wasn't for that unique scenario of the subtitle issue, I would just describe as English language movies, like Nosferatu, Anora, The Brutalist, maybe Maria, but they're not actually. They're mixed language movies, and at the point where someone starts speaking in a language other than English and the subtitles are in Spanish, I'm a little bit lost. So it's a narrower category of films that I can actually see. Sorry, got a little bit of cough. I identified Mickey 17 as one film that would be out while I was here that'd be worth a look. I'm sort of generally, I've always been a big fan of Bong Joon-ho, but in more recent years, I've been less keen on him. I think he kind of rose to prominence internationally with The Host and Memories of Murder, which, if memory serves, come out one after the other. And I really liked The Host when it came out. I revisited it in recent years and I like it a lot still, but it's definitely fallen a bit in my eyes. And it's kind of like the early signs of the issues that I would ultimately have with his sci-fi movies. But it's, for me, still the high watermark of his sci-fi films. But then Memories of Murder I liked a lot more. And then I think the next one might be Mother. Mother's my favorite of his. I adore Mother. So I've in his early work, I've really liked most of those films. Gone back in more recent years and watched Barking Dogs Never Bite, which I think might be his debut. And I thought that was really okay. Classic sort of, this guy's got something, but this isn't the one. But the second half of his career, which is a bit more international, are a bit more sci-fi focused. Snowpiercer and Okja, both sci-fi movies that I had a lot of problems with. Snowpiercer is one that, when it came out, it didn't really set the world on fire. It didn't make much money. It didn't get that much attention. And since then, I'd say fairly soon after its release, but certainly at some point after its release, it got that classic underrated label. This film's actually amazing. People didn't get it. People didn't watch it, but it's amazing. And you just know that that means that we're going to get like 20 years of people saying it's like one of the best sci-fi films ever made and is amazing and stuff like that. It's almost like you'd want your film you deliberately want your film to not be successful in release because it just gets such like overzealous praise for the next couple of decades. I think it's an okay film. I think it's one of his weakest personally, but I mean, of course, it's all subjective, but just didn't really do it much for me. But I remember watching Snowpiercer and really liking a lot of the world building details when they'd move into a new carriage and you just sort of look at the set design and you go, oh, right, okay, this is this and everything. And, you know, I think he's really good at that. He's really good at sort of pinning together boxy environmental details, little character moments and stuff to paint a vivid picture of a world. Berry's Birder and Leather definitely feel like they're set in really well realized worlds, but the actual plot, characters and stuff in Snowpiercer, like very camp and thin and not very well fleshed out or very well conceived to me. I know I'm in the minority in that regard, but anyway, that was my take on it. And then Okja has that like horrific Jake Gyllenhaal performance, and I think I remember a pretty dodgy Tilda Swinton, and it's just very big, very camp, very latter-day Tim Burton. I liked a fair bit in Okja. I think it's like got some really powerful commentary in it, and there's stuff I like. But yeah, not too crazy about it. Parasite I liked quite a lot. I think, again, it is considered one of the best films of recent years at the very least. I think a lot of people, especially younger people, would call it one of the best films of all time. I've only seen it once and it didn't get anything approaching that for me. Certainly wouldn't be anything close to how much I like Mother anyway. But yeah, more of a return to form, I suppose. I like his dramas more than I like his sci-fi sort of blockbuster type movies. The Host notwithstanding. But this one, I was a bit dubious about. I thought Bong Joon-ho making a sci-fi popcorn crowd pleaser type movie is something that I'm not excited for that. I hope that after this film he goes back to making a character drama. And then Robert Pattinson is someone I'm always very wary of. I think he's done some good work. There's Pattinson performances I like. He seems to play simpletons a lot, and I think in something like The Rover, I didn't like him at all. Mickey 17, the simpleton character that he plays in that, I thought wasn't particularly great. But Good Time, he's kind of playing a simpleton, but he's also like the shepherd for an even more of a simpleton character, so it somehow that maybe makes it work a bit more. But yeah, he's terrible at accents, I'll tell you that much. Something like The Devil All the Time, if that was the name of that Tom Holland movie, that is some of the worst accent work I've ever seen in a film. At how big and ambitious he is with his acting is it just doesn't work for me at all. So when a big director casts Robert Pattinson in their work, as all big directors do, it's usually a negative for me. It's usually like, oh, well, that's me a bit less excited about that movie. But I don't hate him, and I have seen some things that I like him in, but just generally I think he's quite a weak actor. But I guess for everyone else, this was like, wow, the dream team, Pattinson and Bong Joon-ho teaming up together. Whereas for me, this is more, I'm not so sure about this. Pattinson and Sci-Fi Bong Joon-ho teaming up together. And I won't say that my skepticism was completely overturned by the film. I thought it was okay. I thought it was fine. I thought it had all the problems that I thought it might have for me. it starts off fairly strong. I mean, not the very beginning. The very beginning is a bit like, we've seen it 1,000 times, that like throw you in the middle, and it's supposed to inspire curiosity to justify going back to the beginning, but it doesn't really, because we've seen sci-fi films before, and it's just not like, I don't think it's as clever a way of structuring it as they've hoped. That bit where it's like, oh, wait a minute, he's dead, but the guy says we're going to see him again tomorrow. Like that's not novel anymore, that kind of thing. But when they do go back and they show the whole like history of like how he got there, it's mostly good stuff. I mean, it starts off with a very classic camp sci-fi Bong Joon-ho plot of like the macaroon store and the gangsters that are after them, and it's just way over the top for me. I wish he'd reel this stuff in a little more. But obviously, he's having fun with it, and most audiences are having fun with it. So, you know, every film doesn't need to be made for me specifically. But yeah, I think in terms of like the kinetic energy of it, it works pretty well, and they get you back to that point when we finally see the title card of the film in a way that is quite entertaining. I think like Mark Ruffalo's performance as Donald Trump in the movie is pretty annoying by the end of it, but by that opening first act, we've only seen like glimmers of it, and that's fun. And the bits of technology and stuff we see, that's fun. So it's really like all of the first act stuff where you're kind of establishing the world and setting the stakes and everything like that is good. It's the best part of the movie for me. When you get into the like, now what's going to happen beat by beat, him getting invited to a dinner party up in, you know, with Toni Collette and Mark Ruffalo, or him going to that French girl or whatever she is, her room, and the, you know, menage a trois stuff and everything, that's all pretty bad for me. That's all like, what are we doing here? What's the focus? What are we trying to achieve? We've gone from this like high concept, big sci-fi setting to just like a screwball comedy bumbling about this, it's not, I don't know, spaceship, whatever they're in, this base. And yeah, I think that kind of took the wind out of the sails a bit of the film. It had established a lot of decent stuff, and then it starts just doing quite boring stuff with the characters. And then at the end of the movie, we get a sort of Marvel situation of like high stakes, calamitous stuff is going to happen unless we stop the baddie. And yeah, again, probably works for a lot of people, but doesn't really work for me. So overall, not a film that I'm a massive fan of. It wasn't like, I mean, there's so many films that we can compare this to, like Arrival and Interstellar and all these like kind of a bit more arty, bit more smart, big budget sci-fi movies of, you know, the last 10, 15 years. And this one, other than it's got some of that Bong Joon-ho screwball comedy energy, it doesn't really do anything of note to stick its head above the pack for me. But it's also not that bad. I guess I'm just not the target audience for this. I remember when I went to see Avengers Endgame in the cinema, and I found it incredibly boring. Like I really thought it's probably, because it's so long, if it had been 90 minutes, just make it be different. But because it's so long, it's got to be one of the most boring and challenging experiences I've had in the cinema, where I'm watching it, I'm like, this is doing nothing for me. I could be just sat on a random street, just sat down on the ground watching life go by, and it would be more entertaining to me than this. And then I assume that would be kind of the general reception of it. But then afterwards, people are talking about how it's such a special movie. It's such a worthy climax to, you know, 10 years of storytelling, and it's like a one of a kind. You know, it's almost like people are like, they would talk about every superhero movie after that as like, Endgame has set such a high watermark in terms of quality that like we can never like what we can't ever expect to hit those highs again, sort of thing. I wouldn't be surprised to find people going like Mickey 17 is unanimously agreed upon to be like a perfect movie, because there just seems to be a disconnect that I have with general audiences, like most people, when it comes to like how exciting I find the type of stuff that's like going on in the end of this movie. I just don't find it exciting at all. I can find blockbuster entertainment exciting, but sort of use zero dimension baddie and CGI aliens bomb is going to explode everything, like where it's not coming from any kind of character place at all. It's just all like high stakes sci-fi machinations. That really doesn't do it for me. So third act doesn't do it for me because I'm not a blockbuster guy, or at least not in the pocket for this kind of blockbuster storytelling, this kind of superheroes and sci-fi stuff. Middle act doesn't do it for me because it doesn't have any focus. It's just them one bumbling around from here to there, pretending like there's peril here and there, like someone's going to die or someone's under threat, but it never really feels like it actually has much weight. And then first act really does do it for me because it's cool, it's interesting, it's nice. It's like watching a Black Mirror episode. Oh, the world's like this, and this is part of the world and stuff. And I like Stephen Yeun in the movie. I liked some of the characters. Some of the characters I didn't like, but it all just felt like there wasn't much beneath the surface. And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's, maybe there was never an intention to have any depth to this film. But yeah, I think it's pretty disposable. And I'd love to see him, if he did something as serious as Memories of Murder or Mother, especially Mother. Mother seems to be his most serious. Memories of Murder has got, its amount of comedy in it, which is fine. It's ultimately a very serious movie, but I would really like to see him do something more serious at some point soon. So yeah, anyway, hope you liked it more than me. And yeah, let me know what you think. Hey man. Back in Blighty now. Have been for a few days. It's been, I don't know, about a week or so since I watched Mickey 17. And I think, if I remember correctly, I had just walked out of the cinema when I sent you a voice note about it. I suppose at that point, I still had whatever benefit the big screen experience gives you when you go see like a, sort of medium to large budget sci-fi movie. And I also had the like sort of pomp and circumstance that comes with like a new Bong Joon-ho movie and one of the most anticipated films of the year for film nerds or whatever. So I think I may have actually been thinking about the film somewhat more favorably at that point than I would now. And that's not to say I'm now thinking, oh God, what a piece of shit or anything like that. It's more just, I think we've watched a lot of Wim Wenders movies over the past 6 months or whatever it's been. And I think for both of us, the experience has been, you watch the film, you have, whatever experience you have. And then in the following days and weeks and months, the vibe and the kind of the overall lasting impression and takeaway and sentiment that you have for that film really starts to glow and really starts to sink in. And yeah, a lot more appreciation can kind of come out in that space. For me, the fact that hasn't happened for this film, that whenever I think about Mickey 17 now, I only really think, I think that was flimsy. That was shallow. That didn't really do anything. That was underbaked, or, there hasn't been anything where I've been turning it over in my head and be like, you know what, man, I really like that approach to that, like that tone, that specific tone he was setting, or I really like that vibe. There's none of that. And little plot details will kind of pop back into my head and I'll go, what was that about? Why was that included? So yeah, it's probably would have been maybe my second least favorite of his movies. Barking Dogs Never Bite just didn't really do it for me. I know it's a highly rated film, and potentially a revisit might improve things, but that film did very little for me. At the same time, Mickey 17 did very little for me. So if I'm choosing which one is my least favorite Bong movie, then it's kind of like, which one did I get the most morsels of goodness out? And I think the first act of Mickey 17 has just got like enough entertainment value and enough kind of like nice little world building ideas that I come away with that one maybe being a little higher, at least in terms of like the enjoyment factor while watching. But it's probably got less depth than Barking Dogs Never Bite. So on that level, it is his most sort of shallow and throwaway kind of film. But yeah, a couple of things I wanted to like kind of come back to that I may or may not have really talked about in my previous voice note, but I thought, as I've kind of thought about this film over the past week or so, have started to kind of nag me a little bit. First thing is the use of satire in the film. Obviously, all of his films are highly satirical, and he is maybe going to go down as the filmmaker most associated with satire of his generation. I'm thinking of someone like Mike Judge is another one who's obviously not particularly prolific as a film director, but he is another one who, if you're getting a Mike Judge movie, you're getting satire. Same with Chris Morris. Again, not prolific in terms of directing movies, but an architect of satire. And I think my favorite Bong Joon-ho movies, like Memories of Murder and The Host, are absolutely satirical, but they're giving you a movie that would be entertaining without the satire, and then they're putting satire into that, rather than they exist exclusively to be a sort of satirical meme. The satire in Mickey 17 about authoritarianism and Trump and stuff like that, animal welfare, colonialism, it's so shallow, it's so unthought-provoking, it's so glib and basic on its, like, it provokes no thought whatsoever. It couldn't be more so preaching to the choir. And I don't just mean myself, I mean like pretty much everyone who's going to watch this, like Bong Joon-ho fans or whatever. It really serves you with nothing of value, and is a bit cringy. Like, if you are reckoning with this era of like cult of personality politicians and rising fascism and racism, this kind of stuff, and you're grappling with it, and you're thinking about it, and you sit down and you write, I know it's an adaptation of a novel, but you sit down and you write a movie reckoning with it, and it comes out this uninsightful and reductive and kind of worthless on a satirical level, then that's not a great look as like one of the most celebrated auteurs of his generation. And I say that as a big Bong Joon-ho fan, but as much as I found the satire in Snowpiercer and Okja to be like very simplistic, this is really like taking the biscuit in terms of like, let's say you watch a High School Music movie, like just any Disney Channel original movie. It will probably be satirical to some extent because they will show the structure in the high school with the principal and whatever events happen in the movie in a way that kind of comments on society and sort of warps it a bit. And they'll just do that naturally because it's almost like just default writing style. You can't help but do that a bit. And maybe to some children, there will be a bit of value there. But this is no more sophisticated than that, in my opinion. So I feel like two missed opportunities. One would be removing satire from the film. The other would be putting good satire in the film. The way it is as is just you're kind of left in a no man's land because it takes up a lot of the film. And I think when you first see Ruffalo and you get first initial glimpse of him, you're like, okay, you've done your kind of nod to Trump. Let's kind of like, we get it. We don't need more of that. And then it just keeps on pouring more and more in with the red hats and assassination attempt, whatever it is. Like, it's just stupid. And it's taking up room that could have interesting sci-fi ideas or interesting thriller plotting or whatever it might be. So that didn't work for me. And that's irked me over time. And it's got weird plot points. Now, I haven't read the novel, and it's sometimes the case that through adaptation, you kind of import plot points and events that made sense in situ in the novel, but when you have adapted it and changed how characters behave and look and removed characters, added characters and stuff, certain plot points no longer have that much integrity. So there's a lot of that of like, okay, all right, I'm not going to interrogate this much. I don't have much faith in this movie. I don't think it's a serious film, but to whatever extent you are trying to immerse yourself in the narrative and buy things, it's flimsy. Robert Pattinson, he's a handsome guy, I presume. I mean, who knows whether someone's actually genuinely good looking if they were just working in Tesco's or something, or if we only think of them as handsome because they're like a big A-list actor. But the character that he's playing, he's like, seems to be sort of, mentally disabled or very kind of like learning disabilities or whatever it is. He's a loser, schlubby guy that like everyone bullies, yet every hot girl is just like all over him, like to an insane extent, even if they're like literally sat there with their significant other, in the case of the lesbian girl. He is the object of desire to the extent of like Jessica Rabbit in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So it doesn't make any sense that, and a lot of the film hinges upon that. I mean, probably about 20% of the film's runtime is just girls just cannot get enough of this Mickey 17 character, not even Mickey 18, but Mickey 17. Then I think Nasha might be the name of the character. I'm forgetting that. It's been a while. She says that every Mickey has been a bit different. And we've seen them. We've seen in montage various Mickeys. We've seen Mickey 1 extensively in the first act of the film. And we've seen Mickey 17 extensively in the first act of the film. And they're identical on a personality level. And then every clip we see of Mickey 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. seem to be identical. But because she's with him romantically, she's noticed that there are subtle differences between them. Like one's a little more anxious, one's a little like this, but it hasn't been there on screen for us to observe. They've not gone the route of like, they're all completely different personalities. But the other Mickey that prominently features in the film, Mickey 18, is like the opposite. It's like the Tyler Durden to his Edward Norton, or even more extreme potentially, which doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any, and when I say it doesn't make any sense, I mean, I don't get how Mickey 17, his memory bank from the last time he woke up, used to print out a new Mickey, yields that Mickey 18 personality. It doesn't make any sense within the internal logic of the film. It doesn't make any sense in terms of our observance of the character over the course of an hour that we've been watching the film. Only makes sense in a sort of SNL skit of like, what if there was a good one and a bad one? Like that kind of thing. What if they're like the yin and the yang, or the odd couple or something? It makes sense on that level, but it hasn't been earned in any way, whether it's artistically or kind of like logically. So things like that, again, where you're just like, just go with it. Don't ask any questions. That seems to be the general approach to the screenwriting here. Same thing with the animals. Like, what's their deal? Why, like, what was their approach? What's their biology? it's a whole planet of like millions and millions of them, but they've got one mother who just happens to be who Mickey met at the beginning, and then they do this whole play where they're going to bluff that they're able to make this noise that will kill everyone, but they don't prove that they're able to do that. They don't really illustrate that point. And it's reliant on the fact that the humans have just invented a translator device. So they're able to communicate that bluff, and then it's instantly bought by enough people within the human society that it becomes kind of like the two conflicting, approaches between Ruffalo and the goodies or whatever. And then it turns out that it was a bluff, and their way of testing the bluff, Robert Pattinson et al., is to just get them to do it while they're all there. That is, to me, that seems like initial first draft kind of sketches of like, let's just get something down on paper. I know it doesn't work, but let's just, go over that hump so that we can keep writing, gets the end. We'll catch that in another draft. It all just seems like very flimsy. So I think, generally the takeaway I have here is that the film absolutely crumbles after the fact. Some good films do. Some Chris Nolan movies that I've liked kind of crumble after the fact when you start dissecting it. And then you go, wow, what a magic trick. That movie is a brilliant, exhilarating ride. Yeah, if you forensically dissect it, it is actually like gut taped together. I would say this film, I found it to be, the first act was entertaining and engaging. Second act is just like wandering here, there, and everywhere around the ship, just like random shit happening that's not thrilling and is unfocused, and it doesn't even maintain any DNA that you could spot across the whole 3 acts of the film in terms of like the energy, the commentary, the tone, anything. And then the third act is just like MCU bullshit to me that even is even undermined at the end with this like bluffing thing. Then you get that weird nightmare dream sequence thing, which also I don't know why they put that in. I don't really see much of an argument for that other than just like, here's the thing that we could put on screen that would have people be able to act in a camp kind of way, ham it up a bit. It's very hammy, the whole film. Pattinson, I don't like Pattinson doing ambitious voices. I think I said that already, but I really don't like, I generally don't like actors going that big. I think there are some examples of actors who've been able to do that. And sometimes in the case of, let's say, the Heath Ledger character, the Joker, the character is so big that it deserves that level of bigness. But for the most part, I don't like this. I really hated Gyllenhaal in Okja. He's one of my favorite actors, and it was the same thing, and it came from the same director. I'm not sure if he wrote Okja, but it's that playfulness and that kind of giddy, let's do something wild here. It is sort of Rick and Morty-esque in a way. It's silly. It's very, very, very silly film, in my opinion. And yeah, I didn't get much from the film, and what I did get just sort of was washed away like tears in the rain, as they say in a much better, big old iconic sci-fi movie. So yeah, not one for me. And I want to see the next Memories of Murder, the next Mother. Parasite isn't my favorite of that kind of Korean character drama, non-sci-fi thing that he does, but I do like it. So whatever's next in that realm, ideally something that's very uncomedic and very serious, and it could be satirical for sure, like Memories of Murder, but I think he has potential to be a brilliant, serious filmmaker, and I would love to see him return to making serious films.
I feel like Mickey 17 has everything that is wrong with the worst of this director in the movie, and it still has sprinkles of magic that he's able to do in a movie. Now, overall, I'd say I like Mickey 17. I didn't love it, but in what we differ and what we agree on, we can certainly have a conversation. But just getting back to Snowpiercer for a minute, I think Snowpiercer is very heightened. It's very satire based, as indeed is a lot of his films. But I think with that one, where they use the train as a microcosm for society, and you have the different carriages, you have the people having a revolution, you have people in a dance carriage forgetting about all the conflicts that are going on. Then you have the leaders in the certain carriages basically having a great time, and then the workers are in the back feed on the flies and the insects and the things like that that get caught on the train or something like that. So I really like this director when he's very much a working class hero with, I think, critiques of hyper capitalism, which works at times with its hyper satirism. I like this director when he gives us feeling and characters, well drawn characters at the center of his movies. Like Parasite, for instance, is a biting satire about the way the working class literally have to live off rich people and try to social climb and almost have to replace them to get anywhere in society. They had some very good characters at the center of that movie, and I would say I think Parasite is a masterpiece. I would say I think that Snowpiercer was critically championed at the time from the very beginning. I just think it didn't do very good commercially. Then I would say there's movies that is the worst of what this guy has got to offer, like Okja, where the level of satire and the type of Jake Gyllenhaal performances, and is the case with Mark Ruffalo's Donald Trump and Mickey 17. It's like big fat bastard in Austin Powers probably had more nuance than these characters, and I'm reminded of Squid Game sometimes when there's directors. I think Squid Game is Korean as well, but it's not just a Korean problem. In fact, it's a society trying to give their take on other races problem. You know, the way if Americans do Japanese characters sometimes, and it's almost like a ridiculous caricature where they feel like they've never met somebody or translated an actual meaningful conversation with that person. I feel like in Squid Game, once they got to the Americans behind the masks that were behind these games, I felt like those characters felt like Koreans' viewpoint of Americans that they observed at a table across from them are just the worst traits, but not really character behind it. So I feel like the worst of Bong Joon-ho's observations does end up like Jake Gyllenhaal's character in Okja and this Mark Ruffalo Donald Trump thing. So yeah, I am a big fan of these movies, and I think I am the middle ground and maybe the missing link between what I can understand what people liked about this movie and what I can understand what people didn't like this movie, because there's certain things about this movie I absolutely hated, and there's certain things about this movie that I really liked, and it's such a tightrope. It is such a tightrope between something that's so bizarre it's scary. Like, I haven't seen much Black Mirror, but the Black Mirror that I have seen, it's just so ridiculous, but there's something so real about that. Whereas in an alternative world, this could be true. And indeed, it's true in our world in some way or form. And that's fucking terrifying. And I feel like the best of this director's movies manages to capture that, and the best of Mickey 17 manages to capture that as well. Like, for instance, you mentioned that he Mickey 17, how he joins the colony expedition or whatever the fuck it's called. He invests in some macrooms and then he gets chased by some loan sharks and whatnot. It's just started fucking raining now, but I'll have to find a bit of shelter. They invested in macrooms and he has to flee the country, and that's typical of this director and his ridiculousness. Yeah, but that's the type of thing that's so ridiculous. It's kind of true. Like, people do invest in the most fucking ridiculous of things and get themselves in the most ridiculous of trouble over something that you would often go, well, that was clearly a bad idea, man. How the fuck did you not know that that was a bad idea? So I think there's something about that, and that works quite well, where you're thinking, yeah, that's ridiculous, but at the same time, there is something terrifyingly real about that. I don't know how much you're getting of this now, because it's absolutely fucking battering down here in the rain. Lovely. I'm gonna find a tree to hide behind, and there is something biting about the satire at times in this movie, and it's unexpected ways. Mickey 17, the character, the way he's just so, like, stupid at times, and he's just rife for exploitation, and the way they kind of circle around him like piranhas, that, oh, you want to be an extractor, oh, do you know what that is? And they obviously know they're taking advantage of him, and they're taking glee in it. So I feel like the satire, the most ridiculous heightened satire in this movie, bear in mind, which didn't work for me on many occasions, when it does work, and I presume what it works for with people, is on a very emotional level. Like, it's almost a type of catharticness of emotion that, yeah, I wanted to say that. There's a scene where the Donald Trump president is being, like, so stupid and so over the top, and it really didn't work for me, that character. But the Nasha character, she screams at him and she says, shut the fuck up, you stupid piece of shit. And I was watching this with my partner, and she said, oh, it's good for a character to be going as ape shit as someone would in that situation for once. And that is true on one level, but to me, it was more along the lines of, this is what every quote unquote American wants to say to this president, and to play this out like a fucking, what do you call it? A jester in the court. You know those puppet shows that are played in the court in these medieval times, where there's just so, like, oh, poopy, sword up the arse. And then, but the villagers are getting to see the king mocked, and that is very cathartic to them. I feel like that is probably what people are getting from this movie on an emotional level. And there's a scene where the Nasha character literally has her mouth gagged by the president, where she can't speak, because if she does speak, this baby will get destroyed, is speaking on some level to the way a certain section of America feels about abortion rights and reproductive issues, where a woman literally can't speak about something that is connected to her. These type of things both worked for me and didn't work for me in this movie, and that is one that did work for me. But I'm just going to get into it now. That character of Donald Trump, played by Mark Ruffalo, you can just imagine these Hollywood people just sitting around thinking, oh, wouldn't it be funny for, let's hope he sees this, and you can just see us mocking him. Ha 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 ha. And I don't like Donald Trump, don't get me wrong. I think he's fucking ridiculous. But you can just imagine the smugness of these people in Hollywood thinking, oh, this will be so funny. This will be ridiculous. Oh, we'll really get to him. And when he sees that or hears about that, Hollywood fights back. It's like something from Team America. But it's not funny. When I seen him to begin with, I was thinking, oh no, I'm not going to have to see this the whole movie. And then, like you said, with the MAGA hats and just like how this character is anti-science. There's the wife speaking in his ear because he's so stupid. Yeah, you're in charge, Mr. President. Ho, ho, ho. And then there's a kind of tech bro with a piercing, I presume, or maybe he's a church bro. I don't know what they were getting at that with that type of satire. I didn't quite understand that, but it's very poorly done. But I would make the case that the people who do like this are living out their fantasies and living out how they see that president in very crass terms, and it's washing over them and getting to say and speak what they've been wanting to say. They're almost getting it acted out in the most extreme sense on screen. I clicked into this movie. You mentioned the opening sequence where it starts at a certain point in the movie before going back. I feel like that kind of worked for me. It reminded me of a graphic novel. We're going to be getting these different vignettes and these different stories of Mickey and these different things that happen to Mickey. And especially when we do get the flashbacks and we do get to see the different versions of Mickey. I feel like the way the opening act was set up allowed me to be okay with the tonal shifts of this movie. And these times, like that scene where she's thinking about having the threesome with the two Mickeys, and these tonal shifts. I feel like because of the editing and because of the jumping around and because of the multiple Mickeys and the fates that happened them, it allowed me to vibe with those changes perhaps a lot more than I would under other circumstances. So I had no problem with that. I really liked the whole getting off the planet. I really liked, which is something that happens with this director quite a lot. I don't know if he's a vegetarian or vegan, but he has a very animal rights lens, I feel. And I think there is some emotional heft to this movie in the way that we see Mickey treated like a lab rat, treated with indifference, treated with a disposable nature. I feel like, again, going back to the working class hero version of this director that I like, I feel like Mickey 17 is a representation of a disposable workforce in general, where you're all the same. Do the tough jobs and die. We'll send you out to fucking do these terrible jobs because you're disposable, because I can find another Mickey. And even though that works as a character in this movie, combining that with the feeling of how workers are exploited, this movie works very well in an allegorical sense. But I do feel like because we see how Mickey is treated, and even some of the scientists, how they look at him and how they, even when they think they tried to help him and they're speaking to him nicely, they're still speaking to him almost like a piece of shit and speaking to him like something that's beneath him. This kind of intellectual scientific community. It, and that's how you see people sometimes speak for the working class and speak for, when you see the intelligentsia speaking on behalf of certain people and certain races and certain groups, they almost look at them as a fucking art project. And I remember I watched this documentary a few years ago, and it was about this ship that was, I think it was a slave ship, and then they were able to trace a certain group of African Americans back to this horrible tragedy. And then they have these kind of museum curators talking about something that's obviously horrific that happened to a group of people, and how he's describing it on stage with these ancestors there. He and I quote, he says, "Oh, and as you can see, we've recreated the ship of that fateful voyage." And another guy is standing next to him thinking, well, I don't think it was a fateful voyage as much as a robbery of people to be sold off. And there's definitely a hint of that in this movie, the way Mickey is looked at. And I do feel he's quite endearing. And I do feel you do get emotionally invested in him, because this is somebody who has to deal with that, know he's going to die, get used to it, and doesn't really have a backbone. I thought that was very good. And I think as well, I'm not big on Robert Pattinson. I'm mixed on him. I think he's good sometimes. I think this performance suits the sometimes cartoonish nature of this movie. And what I did like was his accent kind of reminded me of Steve Buscemi. So there was something comforting about that. And as a performance in something that feels like a graphic novel at times and feels a bit over the top, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way, I think the performance very much fits what this is. And yeah, some of it was emotionally resonating for me as well. And you mentioned the Mickey 18 character, and you mentioned that there was no logical reason for him to act that way. I can make a case for it, and I can make a case which we often talk about when the movie's on your side. And the movie, I liked it. I didn't love it, just to be clear. But the movie was on my side, or I was on the side of the movie, should I say. And I feel like, I think what might have happened, even though I grant you that they didn't explain it, but there is literature within that movie that would point to it, although it's not explored. I feel like when Mickey 18 saw himself, it's that type of thing where you manage to see your inner self. It's almost like when people hate traits in someone else only because they have those traits or were like that. I feel like seeing Mickey 17 brought out the worst in Mickey 18, and the reason why he was despising him, and the reason why he was so bitter, and the reason why he was so psychotic was because he managed to see himself in a pathetic manifestation of Mickey 17 when he returns, and he just hates himself. And the reason why he's like that is because he gets to see how pathetic he is and how lack of a backbone. And you do get the impression that Mickey 17 feels those things, and he does have a pent up rage, but he's just so kind of, okay, well, I guess if I have to die. So I totally went with it, and it was like Mickey standing up for himself. And this movie does get away with a lot of these things as well, where the scene where Nasha, she's excited at the fact of seeing two Mickeys, and it seems a bit ridiculous and seems like a shift in her character, and she's high on drugs. It seems like such a slant, but then they kind of pull that back in an emotional sense where she loves all the versions of Mickey's, and then we see the flashbacks where she was with him in the cage, and she's there for him and comforting him, and she really does feel for this guy. So it would be logical that she also loves this part of Mickey and sees him as part of Mickey anyway. And you mentioned the thing about Robert Pattinson, that everyone has to, you have to buy that everyone desires him. First of all, two people desire him. Everyone else is mean to him. And you say it's that thing, if you don't know if somebody is good looking or if they work at Tesco, you wouldn't even look at them, or are they a movie star? Well, he is a kind of movie star in the space in a way, isn't he? He's someone who gets to live potentially forever. He's someone who died and came back. So he is kind of like a rock star and a freak to some people, but there is that type of fascination with this character, with these people in the base. And I feel like Natasha, or Nasha should I say, has a maternal type of protection, and that's where their bond is, where she likes to protect and she doesn't like injustice. So I think I bought that attraction. And with the other girl who liked him, I feel like there is a feeling that she's free-spirited and open to sex in general anyway, so she would probably have sex with quite a few different people. And what really starts her trying to initiate a sexual thing with him is the fact that her lesbian lover has died, and Mickey is somebody who has died. So she's trying to find connection. She's trying to find something for him, and she feels close to him because he has went through something that her lover has went through. So I do think there is a lot of room for some of these problems you have within this movie. Now, in terms of the creatures, again, they worked for me, and the final third worked for me quite a lot. And I remember having a different feeling to you, where I was thinking that, isn't it nice that I have an emotional investment in the finale of this? And I have the emotional investment in the finale of this. And again, this is where the cathartic nature of where people probably found things to like about this movie is that, isn't it really nice that there's a species that are the total opposite to us and the total opposite to everything we've seen in this movie through how Mickey was treated? It's almost something to aspire to be. They show up for one person. They're all backing each other up. They're showing up at the base to get this one baby, where nobody is expendable in that society. Whereas we found in the human society that everyone is expendable at a certain lower rank through the depiction of Mickey. So I thought that was really nice, and I wouldn't go as far as to say powerful, but it is an image, and it is something that I can get behind, and something that did work for me in the third act. And you mentioned in the Avengers Endgame scenario, which is something that I didn't particularly like either, but my partner, who would have been 18 when Iron Man came out, or 19, they went through that all through their teen years to the late 20s. And I have no connection to that movie. I had no connection to that franchise, but how she described the camaraderie and the feeling of unity and everybody getting what they want from that cinema experience and getting all those massive payoffs from their point of view in the final movie was really something special. And she describes it as one of her greatest cinema experience of all time. And that's how the cinema felt, apparently, which is absolutely fantastic that people were getting something from that, which obviously I wasn't, and you certainly weren't as well. So, yeah, I think I certainly got a lot more from this movie than you. Now, again, as we often discuss, because you had a lot not working in this movie for you, I've come out as more of a champion than maybe I am, because I think this is a significant step down from something like Snowpiercer, and certainly nor near in the level of Parasite and Mother, which I really love. But at the same time, I liked it. I think there's a lot of value to it. I certainly can see how all those things didn't work for you, and how you can describe the satire as glib and cartoonish, because I feel like I've seen your criticisms and my likes about the same things showing up at different parts in the movie. So it's almost like I agree with you and also disagree with you at the same time. And I'm privy to some of the things that you have a problem with, but at the same time I can make a case for why those things can work, because they work for me at times, and they probably worked for a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, I hear you, and I appreciate that. Although most of what you're saying in that voice message is complimentary to the movie, that's more just a response to me, and my misgivings that I mentioned, as opposed to like maybe an accurate portrayal of how much you liked the movie. But I'm glad that you liked it more than I did. But yeah, I think like what you mentioned there towards the end about your partner going through that experience with the Marvel movies, and like seeing the team all get together and things are going bad, things are going good, the catharsis at the end of Endgame and everything. And I saw that from the outside looking in. I know people, have got good friends who were absolutely right there, front and center, popcorn in hand, every time one of those movies dropped. Loved every single Marvel movie, and consider Endgame to be like maybe the peak of going to the cinema for them in their life. And like, I have things from my life, like Buffy, for example, that I was there for. I was the right age. I was the right in terms of like what I had seen. I invested heavily in it in terms of like watching it all, and I got to the end of it and it's a masterpiece. I adore it. Like, I speak so highly of it, but I also understand that like a lot of people with shared taste to me, who maybe like a different age or just hadn't seen Buffy, could walk in to a random episode of Buffy and just roll their eyes and be like, this is fucking awful. And there is like, you get out of something what you put into it to an extent. And I'm certainly don't begrudge anyone their love for Mickey 17. And I think you did a great job of detailing how these things can work, and the experience that this film is trying to offer and succeeding to offer for many people. So yeah, like it's mostly lost on me. As you mentioned, it's been a few weeks since I've seen it now. Just about to start. Sorry, call just came in there, and got an electrician coming over in 15 minutes actually. So I'm going to end this voice note here. I'm going to get back to it later, but you raised a lot of interesting points, and yeah, I'll do my best to respond a little bit later on this morning. Hey man, it's got completely sidetracked there. Electrician's been and gone, and I've done about half my workday now, so forget what I was actually saying in that earlier voice message, but I did take notes on your voice message. So let me start responding to some of that. just kind of blow by blow what you've said there. And I think you raised a lot of great points. I agree with everything that you said, more or less. We didn't necessarily like the film the same amount, but I have no argument with 90% of what you said. And I think our opinions on the film are probably relatively close. I thought it was fine, but inconsequential and ultimately just lacking in substance. You liked it, but it's not going to set your world on fire, and I'd be interested to see how much reverence you have for that film kind of going forward, because I think it's fairly disposable in my opinion. But yeah, I'm obviously a few weeks removed from it. You mentioned that Okja was kind of like the worst of what Bong Joon-ho does, and I might agree with that. I mean, I placed this one probably at his worst. I also didn't like Barking Dogs Never Bite, but I think it was trying something more interesting than Mickey 17 is for me. Okja, what I'll say about Okja is Jake Gyllenhaal's performance, I don't think should really be taken as like the barometer of how good that movie is. The performance is horrific, and I think Tilda Swinton, if I remember correctly, was also a bit overly camp there. But the film in general I found fairly moving. I'm a big animal rights softie, as I think you are as well. So Okja is one of those kind of like Free Willy type movies where they're like, part of the goal here is to make you sort of really sad. And it has really fucking dark, scary imagery when they go to this sort of like slaughterhouse area at the end. So yeah, animal rights been running through a lot of Bong Joon-ho's work over the years. I think Okja, it did more for me, but yeah, it's still, he's still playing in silly land. I think that was the first movie he did with Steven Yeun, and if I remember correctly, Steven Yeun was part of some like whimsical band of like eco warriors or something like that, and it's just silly nonsense. I don't know. There's a bit of a Jean-Pierre Jeunet, bit of a, I don't know, bit of a Wes Anderson, and in some director's work, I think it works better. I don't think silliness is his forte. It's a fixation, but I don't know if it's a forte. There's a lot of stuff in Mickey 17 that he's done in movies I like more. You mentioned the like kind of grotesque vilification of Americans and Westernism and stuff like that, and that's obviously a big part of The Host. But you know, I really like The Host, and The Host has so much silliness, and I don't know, interesting. Just sort of looking back at his career through the prism of Mickey 17. Kind of calls to question some stuff, or it makes other stuff look better. One thing you mentioned as being ridiculous was like the macaroon business, and I don't know, I thought the way it was handled as a sort of like Who Framed Roger Rabbit type little montage was stupid and silly and vacuous. And again, if that was in a Wes Anderson movie, it would just be like completely par for the course and it would work well. It somehow just doesn't work with this like movie that is in many ways a quite serious science fiction film. Not serious in its like script necessarily, but serious in its aesthetic and in its score and in just the many aspects of the presentation. There's a bit of a tonal mismatch or mishmash there for me. I love your comparison to the Punch and Judy shows. And you know, I think that's, you saying that definitely helps the film to work a lot better in my head. If I think about it as like people in society are grappling with really difficult concepts, authoritarianism, animal rights, reproduction, death, capitalism, like all of these massive concepts that we're constantly tortured by, and the job of Bong Joon-ho is not to come along and give this like stately, regal documentary on those subjects. It's to give us the cathartic, silly, over-the-top Punch and Judy not dissection, even just like explosion of them. That's the first time someone's kind of unlocked that for me. You saying that as like, that is why this type of thing works. I think when I watch something like Idiocracy, which is like really fun and over the top and bizarre, and it's like a, the Funhouse mirror rendition of our world or those similar things, it's as much as that's a kind of, not, I don't want to call it a dumb comedy because it's very brilliantly executed satire, but it's very basic comedy in the sense of like anyone can understand it. It's not sophisticated in like it's not I don't know, subtle. Probably not choosing the best words there, but like that film is, Idiocracy is not that silly. It's almost like it's serious. It all makes sense. I don't know, I'm saying this in a bad way, but Dumb and Dumber is a movie that is like it takes itself very seriously. It's toilet humor, it's silly jokes, but the plot works. The world doesn't, it's not like suddenly they're animated and they're in a cartoon and then the next minute, like, I don't know, one of them dies and comes back to life. There isn't just like all random chaotic shit in it just because it would be funny for that moment. Every bit of the film respects the whole rest of the film and the structure, and it's consistent, doesn't have plot holes, stuff like that. Feels like Mickey 17 is less tethered to that, like it all has to work, and it's more light on its feet, it's more silly, it's more, Monty Python-y, where it's like we don't need to take any aspect of storytelling seriously, and that is, I think, much easier to stomach if you understand it in that way that you've described of the Punch and Judy show. So yeah, good insight, and that lens may help me appreciate Bong Joon-ho's future work a little better, or at least the movies that he inevitably makes there of this ilk. You also mentioned how like that opening montage or that like opening not sequence, it's like basically the whole first act of the movie that's like a how did we get here type thing, that's zany and wacky and screwball and has this going on and that going on, and some bits it's like quite ominous dystopian sci-fi commentary, and other bits it's like, cartoonish chase sequence and stuff. The fact that sort of prepared you for the tonal shifts, that I can see that it didn't prepare me enough, I guess. I didn't hate the film, and I didn't find the tonal shifts to be like the work. The film didn't completely collapse on itself, but you had a better run of it with this movie, and we often talk about that. It's like how much you like the movie is, to an extent, how much you enjoyed that watch of the film, and that watch of the film is a phenomenon onto itself. It's not just a pure, this is the film. It's not even a pure, this is me and the film in a kind of broader, devoid of that time and space type relationship. It is specifically, what was that 90 minutes or 2 hours or whatever it might be like at that time, which factors in, how hungry you are, how tired you are, what films you've seen recently, what kind of mood you're in, and so forth. So I think that that has gone better for you at Mickey 17 than it did for me, but I can also imagine a scenario where we kind of flip it around the other way, and I happen to like it a little better than you. But you clicked into some of the gears of the film well. I think we're taking like a good approach to it, and so yeah, you fared better with some of that tonal stuff. I love your analogy of Mickey as a lab rat. Of course, we kind of understand him as a lab rat, but literally talking about like what are lab rats on an animal rights level, on a hierarchical power level. If you extend the lab rat thing beyond rats and you look at like, the peons of the working class and how much they just represent stats that can be moved around to those who actually hold power in society. there is a lot of good ground covered here. I know it's based on a novel. You mentioned a graphic novel. It does feel very graphic novel. It feels very like cartoon. It feels like there's a lot you can do here with like repeating themes, and it didn't really convalesce into anything profound or interesting to me, but I can see where they're going for with some of this stuff, or what he was going for, and the author, I guess. And I agree that, where some artists who are, almost certainly from upper middle class or beyond, are making commentary on the plight of the working classes, that it can come across as a bit condescending or tone deaf or whatever. I agree that Bong Joon-ho doesn't fall foul of that. I think across all of his work, and some stuff will be lost in the language barrier for me. So, and not even just the language barrier, but the cultural barrier of me not understanding the class system in Korea and stuff like that. But to whatever extent I can appraise his work from this perspective, I think that he just comes across as a really earnest and considered and genuine champion of the common man, which I'm here for that. So yeah, that's definitely a compliment that I'll pay his filmography in general, and I feel like it's here in this film. I just don't think that the film does anything particularly in terms of like making useful statements about class divisions and stuff like that. Yeah, there was a weird bit of character warping with Nasha in the middle of the movie. She's sort of introduced to us as someone Mickey can trust, someone's in his corner. Like, this is a good person you can anchor yourself on. It's not a complex character. It's not a particularly well-drawn or interesting character. In my opinion, it's more of a kind of blockbuster movie side character. But in the middle of the movie, she becomes they really deviate from that and call to question whether she's trustworthy, likable, a good person, intelligent. And you could put all that down to the drugs that she's on, and maybe that's what they were going for. I don't know if that fully worked for me. I kind of felt like the movie was going towards Nasha and Mickey 18 were going to be a couple, and they're kind of actually not that nice. And then he was going to go off with the other chick. But by the end of the movie, they've fully brought Nasha back around to being like, the main girl and like the good girl of the movie or whatever. So yeah, interesting stuff there. If that's a commentary on drugs and how they change your personality and stuff like that, then fine. I don't know if it necessarily fitted into this movie. I push back a little on your saying that, like, only 2 girls find him attractive. Like, there are only really 3 like girls that are propped up in this movie as being attractive girls. Like, they put on a pedestal. Every other character, whether male or female, is sort of portrayed as like despicable monsters, and all 3 of them, both of the lesbians and Nasha, look at him like with just such lustful eyes. Like when the 2 lesbians sit down next to him in that earlier scene, one of them is like trying to pick him up, and the other one is like very enthused by that. This implication being that they maybe have discussed trying to get him in to a threesome or something like that. Now, fine, whatever. Like you've made a case for him being kind of rock star status because he's interesting, and as you said, after her partner dies, then he has that cachet of like he's experienced death, he knows what it's like and stuff like that. Fine, I can go with that. Like I think for me, a lot of the time when we have these disagreements, you're very good at breaking down the logical like explanation underpinning of why that works, and I can't dispute that. I can't say that those aren't plausible arguments as to why it could make sense. I just don't buy it. It doesn't feel consistent with the movie, way other people treat him, the way, like, I don't know, it felt very camp. And like, if James Bond walks into, like, James Bond, not in a tuxedo, but like all ripped jeans, like just dirtied up. He's just fallen out the back of a truck in some like desert town, and he goes into a bar. Like, this incredibly hot girl will look over him with like the most lustful eyes ever, and you go, this is James Bond. This is part of the DNA of this franchise. It's not real. It's not how people interact with each other. It's oversimplified, but we want to see him driving the Aston Martin. We want to see him have a cocktail, shaken, not stirred. This is part of the package, right? And I think in this movie, that same level of like, just go with it, just accept this is the way it is, was a bit confusing to me. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't something I spent the whole fucking rest of the movie going like, but why were they into him? But it's just a tapestry for me of probably once every 5 minutes I'm getting something where I'm going, all right, okay, fair enough, I'll go with that, I guess. Like, I don't want to draw too much attention to any one specific one because they're very minor crimes, but it's a tapestry of details that didn't work for me. And as I distanced myself from the film over the following days after watching it, more little things would come into my head, and I go, that was a bit stupid. Like, that's just an off-kilter, strange decision. And again, the Punch and Judy thing, it's all just a raucous, crazy, silly, messy scream of all of the frustrations we have as a member of society. That makes me much more forgiving to like every character moment and every plot beat having integrity. I was obviously putting it through too much rigor, or the wrong kind of rigor, misplaced rigor, as I was watching it. And I think that's because I absolutely adore Mother. I adore Memories of Murder. I adore The Host, even though it's one of his sci-fi movies and it's a more camp, sillier movie. I really like Parasite. So I'm more or less like big fan of Bong Joon-ho, and certainly his earlier work I was a huge fan of. So I don't come into this film so much with my this is going to be like Ace Ventura When Nature Calls hat on. I come into it going like, am I about to get the best movie I've seen in years type of potential. So yeah, anyway, I who knows, maybe a second viewing of this film would help me out there. The Mickey 18 character, this is where I think we'd have some disagreement. It's probably a boring disagreement because it's just like, who gives a shit about this? Like, why he's different. You said he's different because he sees the other Mickey, and that calls to question. I'm probably going to paraphrase it wrongly here, but he sees the other Mickey, and that maybe calls into question his own validity of existing, because his reason for being essentially is that the Mickey 17 has passed away, and that kind of creates the vacuum. I don't get that really, because he is literally Mickey 17. He's not even Mickey 18. Like, he is just Mickey 17. Mickey 18 for real would be like taking a memory dump out of Mickey 17 from his body. Am I right in saying that? And then reprinting, whereas this guy is printed in exactly the same way as Mickey 18. Or is it that it's all sealed from the very beginning? I can't remember. I feel like they have like continuity and memories and stuff like that. I don't see any reason, and maybe I wasn't concentrating, but I don't see any reason for him to be much different from Mickey 17. Certainly Mickey 17 isn't different or noticeably different from Mickey 1 that we see in the first act of the movie. And none of the Mickeys that we see, albeit briefly along the way, are different to Mickey 17 either. I think when Mickey 18 sees Mickey 17, for me, he should behave the way the Mickey that we've known and loved for like an hour of runtime would behave. I don't like you've got to know Mickey 1 and Mickey 17 really well, and you have an expectation of how they would react if they saw something like that. And the way Mickey 18 reacts is not in keeping with that at all. I feel like he is just a very different person with a very different personality, and that's the case. You know, I presume that's the case before he meets Mickey 17. We obviously don't see that, but you know, that just seems to be who he is innately. So I don't think there is. I think it you know, a defender of the film might point to the little bit of dialogue Nasha has where she goes, every Mickey is a bit different. And she does a little brief explainer to that. I'm like, yeah, but put that in the movie then. The poster of the movie is like loads and loads of Mickeys, which is a funny sentence if you're an Irish person. But I went into this film completely blind. I knew that Robert Pattinson was in it. I knew that Bong Joon-ho was making another movie after Parasite and that he teamed up with Robert Pattinson, which was quite disappointing to me, but that's just the way it goes. You make a big hit foreign language movie or like Oscar movie or whatever, you're going to get latched onto by a star because the movie has to be sold and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I knew nothing about it. Then I found out it was Sci-Fi. I was like, okay, still know basically nothing about it. Trailers came out, didn't watch them. I don't watch trailers for movies that I know I'm going to watch anyway. And then the posters came out and they were unavoidable. And the posters were like that Michael Keaton movie, Duplicity or whatever it's called. And all those movies that they've made over the years of like, there's millions of the protagonist. And so I was like, okay, all right. So it's a cloning movie and it's going to be full of Robert Pattinsons. And I don't know whether they're all going to be the same or they're all going to be different, but that's it. And that's not the case. There's only 2 Robert Pattinsons in this movie in a meaningful sense. The rest of them we see in isolation for seconds or minutes. So really in terms of like actually on screen together, I think there's only ever 2. And there's 2 ways they could have gone with it. One is that they have the same personality and one is that they have different personality. They chose the different personality one, which obviously is a classic like way of generating conflict and character drama and all that kind of stuff. The bad version and the good version or whatever it might be. And I think, now you can disagree with this, but I feel that they went that way because of the dramatic rewards as opposed to it making sense in terms of the rest of the movie, like the actual science or, you know, the world building that they've done. And so I feel that they should have either gone back and changed the world building to make it so that we make clones of you. They're all different. It's kind of like AI type thing where like we don't actually know where these differences are sourced from or what's happening, but every personality comes out quite different or you know, they're like different parts of your brain are more or less stimulated or who knows what, and lent into that. You could still only have 2 on screen ever, that's fine, but just explain the fact that they're different or make them the same. But framing the whole rest of the movie that all of the Mickeys are the same, and I don't think that Nash's line of dialogue invalidates that reading, and then just making the one extra Mickey that's around a lot in the movie be sort of the antithesis of Mickey 17. I don't think that works. I think that's lazy, and this is my complaint about the movie really, is that I just think there's a lot of like, who cares? I'm having fun. Again, Punch and Judy. If I ever put on a Punch and Judy show for like kids or whoever, I won't care about plot consistencies and stuff like that. So if you're appreciating it on that level, then fine. Who gives a shit? But I do think that if you are trying to hold it to that kind of rigor, that doesn't work. That's my opinion anyway. And And yeah, I think like the last thing that you mentioned that I thought was interesting, I had some complaints about all of the animals coming and just sort of like circling the thing, and they didn't really have any plan. What was their plan? That they were reliant on the idea that the humans were going to, like, in a completely, again, unrealistic shortcutting fashion, have invented a translator right at that moment, and then come out and speak to them and give them an opportunity to do this ridiculous bluff that they're reliant on the humans believing in, with, although provided absolutely no proof of it working or even any implication of it working. Because it's not like someone's head starts hurting slightly or something. It's just completely baseless. It all just seemed thin. Like, it's like, yeah, sure, that could be the nature of that world, fine, but like, you can write anything. You're the author. Just go, like, workshop it a bit more. See if you can come up with something that's a bit more smart, or like just I don't know, a bit more well worked and developed. You said that the overriding statement or sentiment that you got from it was that it was intended as a sort of allegorical contrast to the humans, who every human is expendable to the, structure, and then with the aliens, or whatever you want to call them, that no one left behind, even this one little baby, like that is a point of fixation for every other beast on the planet. Yes, take it on that level. And this again is starting to feel now is like one of those really broad strokes animated movies from the 70s where like there's no dialogue and it's all just like trippy psychedelic statement, fantastic planet-y type stuff, where it's like, okay, if we just take stuff down to like really broad strokes depictions of species, that's more meant to like create moods and big grandiose statements, then I think that works. And I think again we're back to, you were reading this film in a way that these things do work, and seemingly others were as well, because this film has many fans and I wasn't. So I think, if you had watched the film, now we don't do this, we never talk about films with each other until we've both seen them, but if you had watched the film and then you'd sat me down, you'd be like, it's this is kind of the tone of it, this is what he's trying to say, this is his way of articulating it, like this is the kind of tone and approach in a general sense that he takes, this is his way of making statements and stuff without getting into specifics. And then I'd watched it, maybe I would have liked it, because I think you've watched it very well, if that can be said. But for me, yeah, it didn't do it for me. And after all that, I still think, you probably aren't going to say it's one of the best films you've ever seen. I'm not going to say it's one of the worst films that I've ever seen. We're both somewhat moderate on the film. It's now a long time since I've seen it, so I can't even remember the things I liked about it that well, which also sort of speaks volumes. But I know that there was plenty that I had fun with and that I did like. So I'm still a Bong fan, still hitting that bong every time it comes out. But every time he's got a sci-fi film on the horizon, which maybe will be like alternating movies, I don't know, I'm gonna sort of groan a little bit. And I'm, there's so many directors that I'm like, can you stop doing that thing, please? Can you stop making those kind of movies? And can you do the other thing that I like that you do? Of course, I want artists to be able to express themselves, do whatever they want. Absolutely not beholden to my personal point of interest in their work at all. But if I speak just purely from a selfish perspective, I'm not really that enthusiastic about any more Bong Joon-ho sci-fi movies coming down the pipe. But who knows? Maybe next time I'll watch it right. I'll have fun with it. Then I'll go back and watch all the other ones. I'll have fun with them, and I'll have unlocked a whole new pantheon of great sci-fi movies from him.
Yeah, this is going to be my second attempt at this voice note now. So from now on, I'm going to be checking the wave files to see if this fucking falls prey to the budget phone syndrome. Should probably change the name of this podcast to fucking phone it in. It'd be a lot better. Yeah, so I can tell you exactly how long this movie will stay with me, which is not for very long. I can assure you this is definitely a very slight movie in the canon of Bong Joon-ho for sure. Just to get back to a few things you said, as you said that I'm very good at making the logical case for things in a movie, which I agree. And I also agree that everything that you had a problem with, at least for the most part, I've just let slide. I don't disagree that the movie does a good job of establishing why Mickey 18 is the way he is. I think a few lines of dialogue, the fact that the machine has malfunctioned in the past, the fact that a machine has been sent to space to be used for a different purpose almost than it originally was used, the fact that the machine was built by a psychopath. I think all these things are enough for me, and I feel like if the movie's not giving a shit about the mechanisms and the in-depthness of which is discussing those matters, I think then I don't give a shit either. It's not something I need to say, hold on, wait a minute. That doesn't really make sense, because what it's intended to do and what movies in this sense intend to do is get you to that payoff. So sure, Nasha takes a turn halfway through the movie. That's a bit strange. But at the same time, that is meant to give you the payoff of comedy of that scene. And sure, it's a bit strange that Mickey 18 is very much psychotic compared to the rest of the other Mickeys. But at the same time, if you're enjoying the dual performances of Robert Pattinson, then who gives a fuck? And you really don't want to see a movie spend time with this, spend time establishing why girls are attracted to this character. You're not really, you don't really want to see those scenes anyway. They're set to be wasted on interesting time. But I feel like that only is the case and only holds up if the payoff was worth it. And for me, at least some of the time, the payoff was worth it. And I went with some of those scenes. And the movie isn't concerned with hyper realism like a movie like Spotlight or Before Sunset and these type of really in-depth character studies. So I don't really care that it takes these switches and it takes these swerves. I don't really care. But at the same time, I acknowledge your complaints. Regarding the creatures at the end, I felt personally that it was already established in a big way that these creatures could crush them literally any time, because it's already established that they could chew through that rock. The guards say that, I don't know what they're waiting for. They can overrun us at any time. They can chew through this base. So I think the reason why they waited outside was because they were not wanting to risk the life of the other baby when these people already killed the previous baby. So they're almost at a standstill or a deadlock. So I don't think they were waiting on the off chance that that humans invented some voice translator. I think they were at a deadlock and waiting to see what happens and presuming that it wasn't going to end well. But the second that the other baby got killed, there was going to be all out war. And again, you're talking about what was their plan, what was their bluff. I think that moment at the end was just a bit of comedy. You couldn't really explode us, could you? And if it just gets you the joke, if you're enjoying that little baby scream in that scene for the comedy, doing that shriek at the very end, if you're enjoying the payoff of that comedy and you're like, ha, yeah, they were bluffing, but they were only bluffing in one sense at the very end because it's already been established that they could just maul through the base at any time. So I didn't really have a complaint about that. And yeah, funny enough, as I keep saying, that the biggest problem I had with this movie was the Donald Trump character, and I had forgotten that Donald Trump had said that he had a problem with Parasite winning the best film because he had enough problems with South Koreans already, which is a typical Trump thing to say. So Bong Joon is definitely airing out some grievances, even though he's said that this isn't Donald Trump, which it clearly is. And Mark Ruffalo went on a talk show and basically heavily alluded to the fact that he was playing this as Donald Trump, and it's pretty much there for all of us to see as well. So there's no point trying to be coy in these situations. And I think when it comes to sci-fi, Bong Joon is 3 out of 4 to me. The only one I really didn't like was Okja. So I would very much be excited to see what he does next with a sci-fi movie. But my favorite movies have been in his native tongue and not sci-fi. If I'm talking about Memoirs of Murder, Mother, and Parasite. So they're definitely where I like to see him more. I think probably something like a comedy, an all-out comedy, I wouldn't be really excited to see. But as far as releases to come next, then I'm still gonna want my hits from the bong, as you said. So yeah.
A lot of that voice note was very muffled. So there must be something wrong with your phone there. So I didn't catch a lot of what you said, but yeah, I think we definitely differ as we often do in terms of like what we can go with. You'll often say maybe like, this film doesn't care about that, so I don't care about that. And yeah, that's great. Like, I mean, I stand in admiration for your flexibility of like taking films on their own terms. I think I probably find it harder to click into the gear of a lot of types of films. Certainly this type of film. But yeah, it's a mixed bag. Anyway, I think for both of us. And there's no fucking way that character isn't literally supposed to be Donald Trump. I mean, there's like, I'm sorry, but Bong, ain't nobody buying that. Apparently his next, I don't know if it's his next film or the film after that, is a horror movie. I've just learned in the last half an hour. I don't know if that's because I think his next movie is Korean, like in the Korean language and stuff. And I don't know if that is the horror film or if he's already got the film after that lined up. And of course, like something like The Host, I think is like The Host is a film that I've often seen it called a horror film. I don't personally think of it as a horror film. I think like kaiju movies are more of like action movies than horror films, generally speaking. And there's a lot of people who could maybe make the case for Parasite being a horror film. I don't agree. Like, I mean, horror is completely subjective. It's in the eye of the beholder. If someone wants to call some Parasite a horror film, like, more power to them. But if I'm sitting down and I'm thinking about what are, in my eyes, horror films, what do I think of when I'm thinking about horror, then I would say that from my own personal way of looking at things. I don't think he's made a horror film yet. A lot of the other big Korean auteurs have. So be interesting to see him turn his hand to it. And I could really see him doing something very special in that space. And yeah, hopefully for my sake, it's got a bit more restraint when it comes to the silliness.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.